It's a cold morning in New York City. The skyline is awakening, commuters pour into subways, shops open their doors, and planes glide overhead like clockwork. But during this routine hustle and bustle, something terrible is about to happen. Two airliners are on a collision course. What unfolds next will set a record for the most deadly mid-air collision at the time, and the first to involve a jet airliner. This is the story of the New York mid-air collision. The 16th of December 1960, New York City, New York, USA. Two commercial flights are making their way toward New York City. The first is TWA Flight 266, which departed from Dayton, Ohio, with a stopover in Columbus. It's carrying 39 passengers and 5 crew, totaling 44, en route to LaGuardia Airport in Queens. The aircraft the crew are flying is a Lockheed L-1049 Super Constellation, a 4-engined propeller-driven airliner introduced in the early 50s, distinctly known for its triple tail and dolphin-shaped fuselage. The second is United Airlines Flight 826, which left Chicago's O'Hare International Airport. Its destination, Idlewild Airport. It has 77 passengers on board and 7 crew members, totaling 84. Contrasting the other flight, it is a Douglas DC-8, part of a new generation of jet airliners, introduced into service less than a year earlier. It's the first jet airliner produced by the Douglas Aircraft Company. Both flights are nearing the end of their journeys, but unknown to their pilots, they are on a deadly trajectory. The pilots of the United DC-8 report that they have a navigation receiver inoperative to their operations department. This is a piece of equipment which helps the plane to navigate. They are then cleared to descend. Aboard the TWA flight, the controller tells them there appears to be jet traffic off their 3 o'clock at 1 mile, northeast bound. United 826 tells their controller they are approaching a beacon called Preston, where they are supposed to hold their position after reaching. But when they reported that they were approaching Preston, unknown to them, they had actually already passed the clearance limit by about 11 miles. The aircraft continues northeast off its intended path. At over 300 miles per hour, the DC-8 strikes the Constellation from the right rear quarter, its engine tearing straight into the passenger cabin, shearing through the fuselage and severing the right wing. The Constellation breaks apart in mid-air, its fuselage splitting into 3 pieces and igniting, crashing onto Miller Field in Staten Island. The DC-8, though heavily damaged, continues flying, but the aircraft is doomed. The outer portion of its right wing and the number 4 engine are ripped away in the impact. Despite the severe damage, the jet limps on, flying for nearly 9 more miles, losing altitude, before finally crashing into a residential building and a church in Brooklyn. The aftermath is chaos. Flames engulf the crash site in Brooklyn. Emergency crews rush to the scene. The scale of the devastation quickly becomes clear. Firefighters work through twisted wreckage and smouldering demolished buildings. Among the remains of the DC-8 is one survivor of the crash, an 11-year-old boy who was thrown from the jet and landed onto a snowbank. Rescuers and bystanders attempt to help him, but he is badly injured and passes away shortly after being taken to hospital. In the days to come, the final toll is confirmed. All 128 people on both aircraft, along with 6 on the ground, have lost their lives. It is also the first ever hull loss of a Douglas DC-8. The Civil Aeronautics Board begins its investigation almost immediately. They sift through the wreckage of the TWA Constellation in Staten Island and the United DC-8 in Brooklyn. They analyse flight paths and interview air traffic controllers. The evidence is clear. United Flight 826 was well off course. The crew failed to slow down adequately and overshot the holding point at Preston. But why? When they examined the DC-8's flight data recorder and questioned United Airlines, the team discovered that Flight 826 was experiencing minor navigation issues. Worse, the crew had been preoccupied with diagnosing a fault in their VOR system, a type of navigation radio. In the process, they missed critical altitude and position cues. The jet's high speed had given them little room for error. United Flight 826 had been assigned to enter a holding pattern over Preston, a radio beacon southwest of New York, but instead of slowing and circling, the jet overshoots the point entirely. The final report issued by the Civil Aeronautics Board delivers a sobering verdict. Primary responsibility lies with the crew of United Flight 826. The report finds that the DC-8 was flying off course. The aircraft had not slowed to the expected holding speed, and the crew failed to maintain and report their position. This was the early jet age, and the industry was still adapting to the high speeds and more demanding workflows of jet aircraft when compared to props. The TWA crew, by contrast, followed all procedures correctly. Their aircraft was descending on schedule on the correct route to LaGuardia. They never had a chance to even see the other plane coming. A contributing factor was a failure of the number 2 VOR receiver on United 826. While not a primary cause, this made navigation more complex, particularly with the high speed of the jet aircraft. The report highlighted the need for improvements in the air traffic control system, including better reporting of malfunctioning communications and navigation equipment. If it had been reported to controllers as well as the airline, they may have been able to accommodate them better. Also, more stringent speed restrictions are introduced for lower altitudes as a direct result of the accident. The collision would remain the deadliest aviation accident for over 8 years, until it was superseded by VIASA Flight 742, which crashed on takeoff and killed all 84 on board, as well as 71 on the ground. A memorial was made dedicated to the victims, as well as a plaque in remembrance of the 11-year-old boy from Flight 826, whose name was Stephen Baltz. It is located in the hospital he was taken to, and incorporates coins from his pocket money he was carrying on him. If you found this documentary worth watching, make sure to give it a like rating for the time and effort I put into making it. Also, you can subscribe if you want to catch future episodes as I upload them, or even check out some of my existing videos too. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.